What's up, everyone? I'm here again to talk to you guys about Sheath Underwear, the most comfortable underwear I've ever owned in my entire life. You know, back when I was younger, I never really gave a lot of attention to what kind of underwear I was wearing. Sometimes I wouldn't even wear any underwear. But most of the time, it was awful boxers with these terrible patterns on them, all full of holes, bunched up and sweaty, creating this terrible smell. It was the worst. So this one time, I'm in a mosh pit. I get hurt really badly, and the ambulance had to come pick me up and take me to the hospital. My girlfriend at the time was riding in the ambulance with me, had to take my clothes off to set me up for the hospital, and when they take off my pants, they realize I'm wearing these awful boxers. The dudes start laughing. My girlfriend left me. That's how bad it was. And you know what I was thinking? If I was wearing Sheath underwear back then, none of that would have happened. I would have saved myself years of embarrassment, all this work I put in with this girl. Anyway, go check out Sheath Underwear. Go to sheathunderwear.com. The company was created by a U.S. Army veteran, Robert Patton. While he was out serving, protecting our rights, he discovered that he needed to come up with a better solution for underwear while you're out in a combat situation like that. It has this 2-pouch technology that separates the twig and the berries. It's fantastic. Go to sheathunderwear.com, use our promo code RRBG, and save 20% on your purchase. It's worth every single penny. If you're watching this right now and you're single, it's because you don't have Sheath underwear. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the RRBG podcast. I am here with a legend of Sick of It All fame, Armand. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Thanks, man.
Armand of It All, I almost called you.
Yeah. That's all right.
Yeah, man. New York hardcore punk legend. How have you been with the quarantine and everything? I mean, I know everybody's struggling with it, but I think we're getting to the end of it.
I think a lot of people kind of took it upon themselves to really shut themselves in. I never really did that. You know, I was out every single day walking the dog and getting fresh air and not, you know, I kind of enjoyed the lack of traffic on the streets, the lack of people I encountered and all that kind of stuff. So there were certain things about this whole experience that were positive. So, and, you know, as soon as restaurants and breweries and places like that started opening up again, you know, I haven't limited you know, my access to them whatsoever. I go out, I wear the mask according to the rules, you know, I follow the rules and that's good enough. You know, It's like, I don't know. I mean, we've never been masters of our own environment. You know what I mean? We could always get sick one way or another. Yeah. And I haven't really looked at life any differently. I think I had COVID back in October. It was it was like a really rough flu that I had that was different from any other flus I've ever had in my life. So I've experienced it. Luckily, it didn't affect my body in the way that, like, you know, it hurt my lungs or really affected my breathing. It just gave me a really high fever, but it didn't even last that long. It lasted like maybe 3 days. Then the fever broke, and then it just kind of lingered for like another week and a half or something like that. But, you know, it wasn't, luckily for me, it didn't hit me that hard. So I'm not that scared of it, to be honest.
That's good. That's good, man. I mean, it's important to have some precautions like you have. Like you said, you wear the mask out of, you know, the respect for everybody else or whatever. But also, yeah, you can't live in fear. I mean, I had a little moment in time where shit got real scary here in LA where, like, I went to get groceries and there was no food. And I was like, I know. Fuck. Like, I know. It's over. Yeah. So that was like my moment of true fear when I was like, if I can't feed myself and my wife, then we're in trouble. Like something's going on. And so that was like the brief moment of panic. But like you, I think I had it, but I think I had it like after NAMM. I went to NAMM as I do every year. Wow. And when I got out of NAMM, I was in bed for 2 weeks. Like, wow. I had to call out of work. I couldn't get out of bed. I had cold, you know, sweats and fever and shakes.
Did it affect the way you tasted or smelled or anything like that?
Yeah, I couldn't smell anything. I couldn't taste anything. I had really bad cough throughout the night. Like I couldn't sleep. So that was one of the reasons I was in bed so long is because I couldn't sleep. It was every time I would doze off, I'd get into like a coughing fit. Like, ugh.
Oh, shit. That sucks.
Yeah, it was fucking awful. And I didn't know what it was. It was, this was like January. So I was just like, man, I got really sick, something really bad. But I never, I didn't know it was COVID. But I'm looking back at all these, what they say are the symptoms and everything. And I'm like, yep, that's probably what it was.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But I mean, it's good that you got over it. And, it sucks that it lasted 2 solid weeks. But, could have been way worse.
Could have been worse. What sucks is that the pandemic lockdown shit has been happening here in LA for a year. I mean, we just like last week they opened up restaurants and breweries for so you can consume inside. Yep. It's all been takeout for a whole year.
Damn, that's crazy because like around here, like New York had it really rough in the beginning. New York was one of the worst states with it, but within maybe 4 months or something like that, maybe not even, maybe 3 months of lockdown, like breweries were open for like outdoor stuff, and it felt like normal life sitting out, because back then it was summer as well, so the outdoor thing was very doable. Right. It wasn't until the cold weather set in where all of a sudden it was like everybody's clamoring to get indoors, and then you had to get reservations, and because all the capacities were limited and all that. So, but nowadays, I don't know. Like there are a few places that just still haven't opened. Like especially as far as beer goes, because like I guess they're doing good enough business just with their pickup and to go beer that they don't feel the need that they have to open their doors to the public yet. And I can see why, like the ones I'm talking about are very, very popular, and people would just descend on them like crazy.
Yeah, man. I spent 8 years in the beer biz. I know what it's like to have a packed tasting room, and then the cleanup after, it's nonsense. So yeah. I get it. I get it. And also, I'm like you. I was stoked to see no traffic and to be able to go to places with no one there. It's like, this is so nice.
I know. You like take a deep breath.
Yeah, and I'm from I was born in New Jersey and I lived there till I was 15, visiting New York all the time, and I saw pictures and I couldn't like envision like, holy shit, Times Square or whatever.
Oh,
empty is it's like vanilla sky. Like, what's happening?
Yeah, that's true. Like that was the most surreal thing, was going to Manhattan, because around here nothing ever really looked all that different because I'm in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. But down in Manhattan, it was like a ghost town, and it was just so bizarre to see it like that.
Yeah. Well, I see you drinking. What are you drinking?
Oh, I'm having a. This is from like last year, to be honest. I don't even know how to pronounce that.
Are you drinking my beer right now?
Guayabera?
That's guayabera. I made that beer.
Oh, what is it? Guayabera?
Guayabera. It's a shirt. It's a Cuban traditional shirt with 4 pockets.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it with the little stripes.
Guayabera.
Yeah, guayabera.
Yeah. There's like a Filipino version of it. There's a Puerto Rican version of it, right? It's like do they all use the same name for it?
I think so.
I think in the Philippines they have a different name, but anyway, that's it's from Cigar City. Of course, it's weird because like it is from last year, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna just drink this one because it's a light, full of flavor pale ale. So I'll just do this. Opened it up. Exploded all over the place.
I mean, yeah, it's those pale ales are like, after a year, it's probably not holding on very well.
Yeah, it actually tastes great. Like, I have no problem with the flavor. It just it wasn't too happy being opened up.
Too carbonated.
And it sucks because I like an idiot, I put the can down on my floor tom over here, so I'm kind of worried that I got some beer in places that shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. But what serendipity that is! That's my beer. I made that beer at Cigar City.
No kidding.
Yeah. I used to work at Cigar City for 2 years, and I got together with Wayne Wombles and Joey Redner, the owner, and I was like, I want to make a beer. First, it was going to be called Libertad, which is freedom. But then I found out that trademarking goes through languages, and because of Anchor Steam, Anchor has the Freedom Ale. We couldn't call it. We couldn't call it that. So then we just, we came up with guayabera to call it something Cuban. But that's awesome.
That is crazy.
What crazy coincidence!
I know, that's nuts. Out of all the beers I have in my house right now, I grabbed this one. And even like in my little cooler right here, I have a sloop that I was thinking about opening, but I opened this one as my very first.
That's so crazy, dude. Well, enjoy it. I would say better fresh, but if you say it tastes good, I trust your judgment. You're a good beer guy.
It's a delicious beer.
I have here, you mentioned sloop. I got shaking it. The joy of shaking it, which is McKellar aged in bourbon barrels. I've been holding on to this for either you or Dave Whitty to drink with. So I'm going to drink it with you now.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm honored. Hey, you know what really sucks is the fact that McKellar closed their doors in New York.
Yeah, and they did in LA too.
They did.
They've been cutting back a lot.
Yeah, that sucks because their spot was so cool and it was right in Citi Field.
Yeah.
So it was like a part of the building. It was like, and you could go in there, and it was usually pretty packed before the pandemic, and you could just go in there and just order using your phone, and they would just bring the beers to your table. Like you wouldn't even have to get up and stand in line or anything like that. It was such a smooth operation, and
that's awesome.
And every beer that they had was on point. Such a solid place.
I missed the one out here in LA. I did an event there. It was funny. I did an event there, even though I wasn't. It was a Cigar City event, but I wasn't employed with Cigar City at the time because I had already moved from Florida to LA. And but it was like the week after I moved here, they were like, "Oh, we're having a tap takeover for Cigar City," and I'm like, "You mind if I still have all my work shirts. I can come here and just talk about the beer for you. I know all of it. It's I could tell you. I got to the point where I could tell you when their IPA was brewed, like the day. I could tell you the day it was brewed because Cigar City has this it's like an education system where you sit there and they teach you everything. And we would sit there at 8 a.m. drinking like 10 different versions of the same beer from different dates to taste the different off flavors, how it's how it's
also like
aging.
a vertical tasting?
Yeah. And we would also drink infected beer just so we would learn what infections taste like. And that was gross.
are they ever like really, really pronounced, or are they looking for the really kind of subtle imperfections for you to be able to like point them out?
Both. We would do everything, the full spectrum. So when it would come to the infections, it was like, all right, here's like a hint of like buttery flavor, and that's diacetyl, and then here's like a little hint of like goat hair, and that's a caprylic acid type of thing, and it's all fucking
who knows
disgusting.
What goat hair would taste like?
Well, it's similar to like goat cheese, I guess.
Boy.
But like a little more subtle. But oh my god, it was just not a good thing to be drinking at 9 a.m.
And not exactly the right kind of flavor to have in a beer.
No, not something you want.
But may be a pairing, sure, but not in the beer itself.
Exactly, yeah. And there's also like green apple is a bad flavor that pops up with certain infections. So it was really educational to work there and learn all these different things. But
awesome.
What got you into craft beer?
It was all the way back in 2004 when I moved from California to Wisconsin.
Okay.
Because the only way I had really fully enjoyed beer up until that point was being on tour in Europe and drinking all these fantastic beers that were just on a rider every night. But it wasn't something that I went crazy for. I didn't like go home and think I have to like really stock up on all these beers. I would have beer, but I would also drink wine more often. I would also drink cocktails more often, like Campari and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I moved to Wisconsin where I really embraced beer. And that was when, I realized that there were places in America making beer that was just as good, if not better, than a lot of the European ones that it had, like New Glarus in Wisconsin and Three Floyds out of Indiana.
Yep.
And I know Goose Island was good back then too. Bell's out of Michigan, so there were all the Midwestern beers that I was tasting around that time that made me realize, holy shit, America has just as strong a beer game as any other place in the world. And so I started really appreciating it more. And that's when I started like always having beer in the fridge. Always. I think I gained probably 20 pounds very quickly living in Wisconsin, but I enjoyed the shit out of some beer. And, that love of beer, that like intense love of beer has stayed with me ever since.
Yeah, it's funny how that works with the craft beer scene. Like once I got into it, because growing up, I was in bands and I was drinking like shitty beer, just whatever was around. King Cobra, Old English,
the worst shit.
The worst shit you could get your hands. Steel Reserve, really, really bad beer. And then once we started touring a little more and going to different states, that's when I saw like North Carolina, I saw a couple of craft beers that I was like, ooh, what's this? And then it just kind of became an obsession to a point where I wanted to make it my career. I was like, I want that. I want to work in the industry. How do I figure that out? Like, who do I need to talk to? Like, I started volunteering at beer festivals and all this stuff. So it's funny. It gets you.
You homebrewed?
I started homebrewing after I got into the business. Like once I was once I was working for a distributor and like tasting all these different brands, the distributor themselves are actually what got me into it, because they would do little homebrew contests, and they would group up people in the company, like, okay, you 3 guys or you 4 people go brew a beer, and we'll have a contest, and the winner gets money, and we'll sell the beer somewhere. And I started that way, and then little by little just started getting more and more into it. How about like you? Have you tried brewing yourself?
I never have. No, the only time I ever really looked into it, I realized like how much it would cost to get like a decent batch of beer going. It was pretty pricey, and it was actually more expensive than buying some pretty pricey beer off the shelves. And then I'd be stuck with one exact kind of beer to drink for a few months, because I don't have all that much help usually. You know what I mean? It's just like me and my wife, and the amount of beer we consume, it's not that much where we'd be able to get rid of a whole like half barrel of something like that easily,
Sure. Yeah.
So like after all, and also back then I was touring a lot, and it's you have to like kind of keep an eye on things, and you have to make sure things aren't going bad, and you have to look for leaks and things like that, so things don't get contaminated. And I just didn't ever have I guess I always loved the variety that I would get from the stores, and also just there was like a pretty big fear factor involved as well. Just like the idea of me having to throw away an entire vat of beer, it would be like a catastrophe.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Especially if you're touring so much, it doesn't make sense to have all that set up at home.
It would be different now, because like just a couple of towns away, I know the guy that brews for Sing Sing Hill, which is like a young beer company, like a local beer company around here. Okay. And so like I would be able to like pick his brain, maybe even have him over and like have him help me get started and all that kind of stuff. Back then, I didn't know anybody around here that was brewing beer, so I didn't have any kind of person to lean on and get that kind of knowledge.
Have you ever considered maybe brewing a beer for yourself with a brewery that's already established, or like a sick of it all beer?
Yeah, I mean, it's like things were in talks very recently, but I don't know if it's going to happen with KCBC. That would have been great, but I don't know if it's going to happen now.
Well, I'll help you out. I'm going to start doing a series of like an RRBG series where I could bring in a band and a brewery and make something happen. So we can make
that'd be
something
great.
happen.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, because that was the original concept of this show. I wanted to bring together musicians and brewers. And like the first few episodes, it was, like episode 2 was Dave Whitty and Chris Bodges of Three Floyds. So like my idea was, let's just bring these two worlds together. But I quickly found out that brewers are not the most sociable people.
Well, It's strange too, because like every once in a while you'll meet a brewer who is,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you'll be very like pleasantly surprised. But and then you have the complete other end of the spectrum where the brewers are the guys that are up at 4 a.m. Hard at work by 5 or 6 in the morning,
yeah,
and they leave the brewery by like 1. The place doesn't open until 2, and then you have the other guy who's like the face of the company, who's like the social one, who
yeah,
keeps the place going and has like and is the most personable, charismatic person in the world. You know,
yeah.
and there are a lot of breweries that have that kind of dynamic going on, and you know, I guess the more nerdy the brewer, the more chance there will be for the person to be a real recluse.
Yeah, yeah,
You
and,
know,
and
the
the nerdier they are,
scientific mind.
yeah, the nerdier they are, the better the beer is. So, yeah, like I mean,
That's
my prime
true.
example is Wayne. Like, I love that guy, Wayne Wombles from Cigar City.
Uh-huh.
He was, you know, a genius. Like he was, I would bring him out to events. I would do like beer dinners. You know, we'll do beer pairings with the food and everything, and bring him out so that the fans can meet him. And he's sitting in the corner with his notepad and like just jotting stuff down. I'm like, hey man, what's up? You don't want to talk to the fans? And he's like, I just came up with a new way to dry hop. I'm like,
Exciting. All
like,
right.
do your thing. Forget about it. I'll go talk to them. You know? So it's really, you know, that's kind of why I kind of just started talking to whoever wants to talk to me now. Cause it's like the breweries, having a brewer specific, it's just too difficult to find the sociable guys.
Is that the guy responsible for the Hunapus?
Yes, sir. Hunapoo.
Oh man, that
Yeah.
incredible beer!
Such
What
a
a
good
beer!
beer.
I
Such
know.
a
I
good
can't
beer.
wait. It's getting close to being released
Yeah, I think
this year.
Hunapoo Day may have already happened. I don't know. I don't know what day it exactly is anymore, but I know it's in March for sure.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I love that beer. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with that brewery.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're a very, very solid brewery. You could always rely on that. Like even that Florida Cracker is like a really nice drinking beer. You know,
Hmm.
it's for what it is, being like a wheat ale. You know, it has a lot of flavor. It's not just some watery thing. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, everything that they do, I'm very impressed. Cigar City. I was able to go there at the end of a tour in I guess it was March of 2019, and I just had the best time. It was incredible. Like we went there, and they had probably like it was like more than half of all their taps were these really heavy duty stouts and porters, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe what I was drinking. It was so good.
Yeah, yeah. That time period, like March, is their like Hunapoo time period, and that's when they go
Hmm.
all out. They go all out with different crazy stouts that they've been aging for years, and very experimental. Like I said, very educational. Like it's like a school. And what a lot of
Hmm.
people don't realize, a lot of the big name brewers that are out there now that you know, like the beer geeks really freak out about, like like Wakefield. Wakefield is a student of Cigar City. If it
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
for Cigar City, you know, bringing him in, he wouldn't have learned all the secrets to making that
yeah.
amazing, you know, he was still brewing cool stuff at home, but there's a huge difference from home brewing some crazy stuff to, you know, scaling it up to an actual production brewery that would put some, you know, consistency.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always heard a lot of stories of hardcore punk, like the scene being very straight edge. A lot of
Yeah.
bands are straight edge. So, I mean, how does that play in with you guys? You know, I know you're not you don't say you're a straight edge band or anything, but you know, what is it? What is it that makes that a part of that culture?
Well, I guess it always was from one reason or another. I'm not, you know, you have to go all the way back to Minor Threat as, you know, possibly the first straight edge hardcore band, but then they started the ball rolling, and then you had Youth of Today, and like all of like the Revelation bands were very straight edge. Sick of It All tends to get lumped into that a little bit because of the fact that like before Sick of It All was a band, Lou and Pete stopped drinking.
Okay.
So they stopped drinking really young. I think they were like, you know, 17. They had one horrible experience, everybody barfing all over the place. But that's like, pretty normal, especially when you're like 17 years old. But for those guys, they literally just said, like, that's it. I'm not going to drink anymore. But they never were straight edge dudes. They never wore the uniform. They never X'd up. They never really, they never wanted to have that separation between them and other people. They didn't want to like create any kind of weird separation. So they were just themselves and lived their lives normally, just didn't drink. And they had never had any interest in smoking or anything like that either. Craig, on the other hand, was a party guy, was totally straight edge when he joined Youth of Today, then went back to it. And then, he was back and forth a little bit because we were actually in Straight Ahead together too, which was known as a straight edge band. And, I was never straight edge. Rob, the guitarist, he was never straight edge. So but Tommy and Craig were. But, Craig at the same time was like, anytime we ever hung out, like in Queens at the alleyway or something like that, like you could see that Craig was like itching to like maybe smoke a little bit, drink a little bit. Like he just really wanted to enjoy, so
sure.
And partake. And, so he was kind of like on the fence for a little bit, but then he went full party guy. And there were many, many years of Sick of It All where Craig was drinking and smoking. And he actually ended up quitting everything back in like 2003 because of the fact that he ended up pot ended up really kind of having too much of a hold on his life. In his mind, if he has a drink, what he's afraid of is that he's going to lose his discipline and he'll smoke again, which is not what he wants. And so he doesn't want to lose his discipline. He keeps, he calls himself Born Again Straight Edge.
Born Again Straight Edge. I like
that. And so that means that ever since 2003, I'm the only guy in Sick of It All that drinks or does anything, any kind of drugs.
Well, good for them. Honestly, I'm happy for people that are able to stop themselves like that. They recognize that they have, and not a problem, but like maybe a small issue where they can't have a drink because then it just opens up the floodgates. I've been very fortunate that I've been deep in the murky waters and been able to swim out and not have to completely cut things off out of my life. Like, when I was working in the beer biz, it was 6-7 beers a day because I was I was visiting accounts, hanging out with bar owners and restaurant owners,
having a drink with every one of them.
Everybody, hey man, did you try a new one? Oh, and it's like end of the day, 7 beers in, and it's every day, and I started gaining a ton of weight, and I'm still working it off. Little by little. I've been out of the industry for a couple of years, but I'm still working it out and getting, back to a normal weight. And now I don't drink during the week at all. I only have like on the weekends, Friday and Saturday, I'll have a couple beers, and it's usually like one big beer like this, and that's it.
Right. What's the ABV on that one?
13.5.
Oh boy.
We ain't going anywhere today, honey. No, but I've been fortunate, but I know that that's a difficult thing for a lot of people that, one beer is all they need to just like set them off. And then then they're in 12 beers and some joints. And then it's like, well, now I'm tired. I need to drive. Anybody got some kind of upper, it just becomes this cycle, this crazy cycle. But
so that whole culture, the party culture, like I was never a big subscriber into the party culture. I love to drink. I love the flavor of it. I love tasting new things and like just expanding my horizons as far as beer goes. But it's not like I look at it like it's some kind of party culture thing that I'm desperate to be a part of. I actually really just love the beverage.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, man. I'm with you on that aspect where it's more about the flavors and the science, like the art behind the creation of it for me now than just like, hey, let's get a 12-pack of, Miller Lights. Like, no, I don't need that.
Right. Yeah. There's no reason. Anytime I find myself in that kind of situation, I really I don't drink. Either I don't drink or I'll look to I've been into like all inclusive places where they have just shitty beers available. And in a situation like that, I'll have Campari, I'll have Italian bitters, and, like I'll have alternatives like cocktails in one way or another that'll, give me a little buzz, but it's never like, I never show the same kind of enthusiasm as I do when I have like a beautiful array of beers in front of me that I'm excited about.
Yeah. Have you heard of the brewery Funky Buddha in Florida?
I have. Yeah, down in Florida. Yeah. I never had their stuff.
Their stuff used to be incredible. I haven't had it in years, so I can't attest to it. And I know that they a couple years back, they kind of merged with a bigger corporate like brewery. So I don't know where they're at. But in the beginning, it was a lounge in West Palm Beach, and it was mostly like a homebrew shop. And then they would have their incredible, ridiculous beers like peanut butter and jelly and, coconut porters and all that stuff.
Thinking back, I think I did have one of their beers down at, because Pete lives down in Florida in Daytona Beach. And I remember going to the store where he lives and checking out like all the different local stuff that they had there. I think I did try one Funky Buddha beer. And I mean, I don't have like a very clear recollection of exactly what it was, but I did try their stuff. I liked it.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because they, at that lounge, so they would have all these ridiculous beers, peanut butter jelly, coconut porter, whatever, maple bacon
delicious
porter, all these crazy things. And then at the bottom of the menu, they had Budweiser. And it would say Budweiser, and then the description would say, if you have just looked through our entire lineup of beer and you still want a Budweiser, it's going to cost you $70. So they would sell Budweiser for $70 if anybody had the balls to be like, okay, yeah, I want a Budweiser.
I want a Budweiser.
So I thought that was great. Like, yeah, have the option, but if you really want that Budweiser?
It's a little over the top. They could have charged 20. I think they might have actually sold a couple.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay,
that's funny.
So going back to like the hardcore, roots and the straight edge cultural thing, it seems to be like an appealing point for a lot of people. The fact of that straight edge culture. What was it for you that got you into like hardcore to do like Sick of It All in the first place back in the early?
It was just the music. It wasn't anything but the music. Like to me, the whole like straight edge thing and the fact that like if you were straight edge, you were expected to wear the uniform and all that kind of stuff. I was never into that at all. I preferred people to just be themselves no matter what, even if it meant that you would go to hardcore shows dressed like a Guido or like a club kid or whatever. Like I would prefer that than somebody just putting on the uniform of the type of music that they like the most, or you know what I mean? Like just I didn't like the fashion involved with and it's funny because like you think about youth of today, you remember the album Break Down the Walls. There were quite a few walls put up because of the fashion involved with straight edge and all of that. So, I've always liked people to get along and have just a free mentality where everybody's just being real, as opposed to like trying too hard to be something.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
So it was always, for me, it was always just the music, the intensity of it, the passion of it, the fact that it was just so visceral and, and accessible. You know what I mean? Like you could go to a show and hang out with the musicians and it's not some kind of big deal. You could just like walk up on stage and shake their hands and stuff like that. It wasn't like the metal shows that I had been to before hardcore where everything was so separate. The audience was usually treated really badly by all the bouncers and the people at the clubs. There wasn't that vibe. There wasn't that like negative energy. It was always like way more just humble and grassroots. And that's what I loved about it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like metalheads, I guess metal bands are kind of putting on a production and that's why they're so protective of their production, I guess. But I have always loved, I grew up listening to punk, like Operation Ivy and No Effects and No Use for a Name and all these, great punk bands. But I was never in a punk band. Like I always wanted it, but I always wanted to do it, but it just never happened. I ended up, just joining a metal band and learning about that culture. And
well, you're probably a better musician for it. Because like I was saying, it being accessible and like anybody could do it. Like if you want to start a hardcore band, you could, and whether or not you're good, it doesn't matter all that much. Depends. Depends on your style. Your style comes out, and that could kind of take over. With metal, it's much less forgiving. You have to be a really technically good musician to really pull off metal. So I think you probably benefited from that musicianship.
Yeah, I mean, I always found that intriguing about the punk and the hardcore scene, where it's like everybody was in a band, and most of them were in numerous bands with just interchanging, band members of like friends. Different friends were in different bands. But I kind of like that whole brotherhood aspect, and not brotherhood into, I'm not trying to like shun women out of it. Like I don't know what other word to use, but that unity thing where everybody's looking out for each other, like in the mosh pit too. Like if somebody gets knocked down, community, right? Yeah. Community. And I love that aspect of it. That's also what appealed to me about craft beer. Like when I saw that there was actually a community involved where people were sharing bottles and like, hey man, come over, we're doing a bottle share, and there's 10 of us and everybody's got little sips. We can all try different things. Like I've always been really big into that. And I've always told my wife too, like my heart beats at like a punk, somewhere in between punk drum beat and a thrash drum beat, where it's like that kick snare, that fast, like that's how my heart beats. Like every time I hear that somewhere, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. So I've always loved that. I remember I actually I forget, I think it was Warped Tour. You guys were playing. And I have a picture somewhere. I got to send it to you. A picture and a video.
Back in the 90s, right? You're talking about?
No, recent. Like
in 2017, I think.
2017, probably. I was with Whitty and Dave Whitty and I. We were like...
That was when I met Whitty.
Oh, that's where you met Whitty?
Yeah, like
I thought you guys knew each other for years.
I should have known him going... Like, we played with Municipal Waste all the way back... I don't even know what year that was, but we played London with them, and that was a while back. But I should have talked to him back then. We didn't really mingle all that much for whatever reason, and it was just a one-off show. If we had toured together, it would have been a different story. But that's kind of what happens when bands do like one-off shows with each other. They don't always end up hanging out with each other,
right? Yeah.
I think Lou knew Tony, and that's how the whole thing came together. So like, but I wish I had known that Dave was the guy that he is and loved beer, and like, because like there's so many years that I could have had that friendship, because Dave and I have been super close ever since that Warped Tour in 2017.
That's awesome. I had no idea that's where you guys met. Like he brought me upstage. He's like, you got to come see Sick of It All. I'm like, yes, I spent years listening to the music, but I've never seen them live. I've never had that opportunity.
Oh, wow. And
he brings me up, and I'm literally standing right behind you, just like, what's happening? And I see the pit, going crazy. And I'm like, this is what I love. I love that energy, the getting the crowd going. And it felt so good to see, like, teach these kids how to do it right. Because Warped Tour was full of all these like pop punk bands, which are, good for them, whatever, but I'm not into it. And it was just good to see like real hardcore punk happen in Warped Tour in like 2017. You wouldn't expect that,
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
That was a good tour.
It was cool too, because Adolescents were on it too. They're super old school, like showing people how it's done. Yeah.
That was a good Warped Tour. That was a really fun year, and it's a shame to see that I think they stopped. I don't think they're doing it anymore. No, maybe they're coming back after the pandemic. I think everybody's going to come back. All those tours that shut down are probably coming back.
Right.
Yeah. But so the last album you guys put out was 2018, November 2018. Is there are you guys working on something new post pandemic?
We are, like, Pete's sending us new songs like every week, like we're getting something new from Pete. And so he has like a good amount of material written already. I've been working on stuff. There was like a long time out of this whole pandemic where anytime I picked up a guitar, like the stuff that would come out was not Sick of It All. You know, it was not. It just didn't sound like something that I could bring to those guys and say like, "Hey, I have a new song here." So it took a while. Now I'm starting to get a little bit more back into the flow of writing, like I play in a hardcore band, and you know, so I have a few things that I'm thinking about actually starting to demo. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean we're slowly getting the ball rolling. We didn't. I don't think it's a good idea for bands really to put out albums in the middle of all of this. Like you really need to kind of tour with the
Hmm.
release of a record for it to gain the success that it deserves. Like putting something out right now, I don't think it would do very well, and like so that's why there hasn't been this like fire lit under us. But and you know it would be different if all of us lived closer together.
Sure.
If Pete wasn't down in Florida, I think we would have gotten together quite a bit and probably worked on new material just because we were in a close proximity. The way it is, he's too far down there, and it's like for him to come up, the whole like travel restrictions were in place and all of that, and then the quarantine, you know, like all in New York being what it is, Cuomo is like super strict about all that crap. So
Yeah.
you know, it's difficult for us to just get together and do things like on a whim.
Sure. Yeah. And
There's a lot of planning that goes into everything.
I would say it's extra difficult for hardcore bands and your type of music because it's not to say that it's not something you would listen to alone at home. It totally is, but there's something about hardcore music and punk music that you want to be at a show. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely.
you want to be
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
pit. You want to be there, raging.
Actually, that's something that in a way it's been a curse for Sick of It All for our entire career because of the fact that like there were quite a few musicians that we figured probably should have known about Sick of It All, maybe listened to Sick of It All, and blah blah blah. And they would say like, yeah, I've heard your guys' stuff, and I'm not really a big fan, you know. But then they see us live, and they're like, oh shit, I get it now.
Mm.
And it's strange. It's a weird thing where like you have this musician that you totally respect who's like giving you this feedback, and you're like, fuck, like what are we doing with our recordings that's wrong? Like when there's something that we're not capturing, and I don't know exactly what it is. I could never been able to really put my finger on it. I think we've done a better job at like capturing what Sick of It All sounds like live once we started working with our buddy Tua Madsen from Denmark.
Hmm.
He was able to get like a lot more of like that type of aggressive sound, and you know, like have our recordings actually reflect that, because before that everything seemed like a little bit subdued. It didn't have the same kind of attack. It didn't have like the
Right.
teeth like trying to like bite at you, you know, out of the speakers. And you know, we always heard it because we played, you know, in the live setting, it's always there. But
Yeah.
then you go into the studio and like everything is so kind of controlled and
Polished and
dampened.
clean.
And
Yeah.
exactly. And like you lose so much of that. But I think Tua Madsen actually brought that out of us and was able to capture it ever since 2006 with Death to Tyrants.
Nice. Yeah, man. It's a hard thing. A lot of people don't think about that. They, especially non-musicians, they have fans that just listen. They think you just pop up some microphones and it'll be fine. Like, no, there's something about capturing the essence of that. Like you said,
Yeah.
capturing the essence of a live show, because that's the true beast is loose and at a live show. And like, it's hard when you're listening to hardcore punk or even like early death metal or extreme metal, where when it becomes too polished, it doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't. It's not the same. One person
totally.
that I think has mastered that the ability to record bands and capture their live sound is Kurt Ballou from Converge.
Oh
And
yeah.
that dude. If you go listen to, some of the newer Converge records or some of the other stuff he's produced, like even, Mutoid Man or Genghis Tron, like he has something. I don't know what it is in he's got a ton of gear that people, love going to play with, but he's definitely learned how to capture that essence of live shows into a recording and make you want to mosh at home by yourself.
And he has his own studio?
Yeah, it's called God City Studios up in New York, I think, or it's either New York or Boston.
Right?
Massachusetts. Yeah, Massachusetts. Yeah. Northeast.
Yeah. Is he the bass player?
He's a guitarist. He's a guitarist for Converge. Okay. Yeah.
Not sure if I ever talked to him. I'm not sure. But it's something to look into because that's not too far from here. That would just be like
a Kurt Ballou produced Sick of It All album would be ridiculous. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I would say. I think it would be really good. Yeah.
I'll make a mental note of that.
I've always been a fan of that live aspect of show of a band. Like if your show, like it goes both ways, right? So maybe your album doesn't capture that live, but when you see it live, you're like blown away. But there's other bands where you listen to a record and it's incredible, and then you go see them live and it's like, it's just
And to be honest, like I prefer having it the way we have it, where it's like maybe on record it's not so impressive, but then you go to see the band live and it's like, oh shit, these guys really bring it. So I prefer having that effect on people.
For sure.
Yeah, when you go see a band and they're let down live, that's like the worst thing. Because so then sad. Like after that, you can't really listen to the records in the same way ever again.
Yep. Yeah, that's happened to me. That happened to me with there's the band Muse is like they're insanely talented, but like back in I forget what the name of the album is, Butterflies and Hurricanes or something like that. I went to see them live, and they performed really well, but the sound that was coming out of the speakers was so polished and so subdued. And everything sounded like it was coming out of the PA as opposed to like
it probably was
like direct. Yeah.
Did they even have amps on stage?
I don't even remember. I don't think
because
they did.
There are a lot of bands now that they don't have amps on stage with them. Everything is direct. Yeah. Everything just comes right out of the PA or right out of the monitors, and there's no amps. So once you take the amps away, all of that grittiness, all of that like real, like kind of raucous, rumbly kind of vibration goes. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure, it's less messy, but you want to have some of that, like, you want the PA to kind of like even out the messiness of what's like coming at you off of the stage. You want the stage volume to be there as well. You want it to be present. I don't understand these bands that like play with no amps. I don't get it at all.
Yeah, it doesn't do it for me. I get it. You're talented. I see your fingers moving, but it's a matter of what I'm hearing. And another thing that I've always found fascinating is even venue size. Like in your head, you think a band is always trying to reach maximum heights of like, I'm Wembley Stadium, but it doesn't really fit for every band. Like there's certain bands that just don't sound good in a big venue.
Yeah. I mean, no matter what, it's always tough to sound good in a big venue. I think the bigger you go, the less the room is even designed to deal with acoustics, you know? So it is always a challenge for the sound man to actually make it sound good in a lot of these spaces. But that's, something that has been kind of cool for us as well, is the fact that we're not expected to play big places. We can't really play a whole lot of big places. Like the only time we do is, the only time we ever touch on places that could hold like say 2,000 people would be on the Persistence tour in Europe or something like that, where you have this like immense package lineup where it's like 9 different bands that everybody's clamoring to see. So it's like, so it's not just us. It's our name is on there. So, a lot of times we headline that one, but at the same time, there are a lot of bands that could draw just as many people as us that are on the bill earlier in the night. But like the fact that when we do our regular headlining shows where we don't have some kind of stacked package, normally we play places that are like 300, 400, 500 people. Like, it's like very small, modest clubs that usually sound better, like they just sound better. Like you don't even need much through the PA. You got the amps blaring loud. All you really need in the PA in places like that are some drums and some vocals, and you hope to find a balance, and then you're good, And usually those places are really kind of woody, and the sound kind of bounces around well, and that's what you want.
Yeah, man, and the crowd's usually tightly packed. Everybody's excited. There's a lot of movement going on. Like, I've never understood that fascination. Like, I have friends that are not musicians that are like, oh, you guys are playing in front of 300 people. Like, what's wrong? It's like, nothing's wrong. Like, this is what we want.
300 people is like, that's a good crowd. That's a good crowd of people.
Yeah, and it sounds better. Like you said, it sounds better. The crowd's more into it. Like when you get into these. Like I see these European festival things on YouTube or whatever. There's like a sea of people, and only like 100 people in the front are moving, and then the rest are just standing there. Like that's not as exciting.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for us, we've had really good experiences with European festivals. Like in those exact kind of circumstances, like what you're talking about, is sea of people all the way to the horizon. Like, but we've been able to get them going, and you see like a lot of action out there. And sometimes it's even to the point that like it was our Braveheart thing that we do, where we separate the crowd, and
the
have
wall of death.
Into each other. Like we don't like to call it that because we don't want to create any kind of problems down the line. But, so we call it the Braveheart. But the festivals, because of us doing that, they started putting that stupid barricade that ran all the way down the center of the whole field, like from the stage all the way to the soundboard. And but I mean, for us, what that meant was the 2 walls of death.
I hate when they do that, man. And I also don't like the enormous distance that they put from the stage to the crowd. Like there's this from the stage to the barricade in the front. It's like a 20, 30 feet or some ridiculous thing. Like,
it all depends show to show, like how you feel up there. Sometimes you feel like you're really like super on display and you feel awkward as fuck. But then there are other shows where you are just as on display, but just for some reason, like something about the atmosphere of like when you're playing, or like what the crowd is like, or what the sound is like, or whatever, you just feel totally comfortable. So that's a real kind of like, you can't like generalize when it comes to big stages and festival events and things like that, because it depends. It really depends on the night, and it depends on the energy from the audience, and it depends on how you feel up there. And like, there are some amazing shows we had that are in the most bizarre settings that you wouldn't expect a hardcore band to really go over well at, but they just have worked.
If you give me that one show that you always think of, or like that you tell your family about, like that was the one, like that was the best night we've had.
I mean, there's, for the reason, because it was the first, I always think back to the 1994 Dynamo Festival in Holland, because that was the very first time we ever played like a huge European festival. We played in front of 70,000 people. And that was the first time in our career that we ever even touched on anything like that. And it was surreal. It was so surreal that none of us were nervous. And we went up there and we played, and the entire place was going nuts.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like the fact that it was that good for our first big festival kind of filled us with confidence going forward, because we never thought that, we never thought it was like a recipe for disaster. We always thought like, hey, look at the crowd. It's going to be great, Yeah. So we've always gone into it with like pretty optimistic perspective since that day, which I think has helped us.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I've been fortunate. Like my band never reached those heights. I mean, I think the most we played in front of was like 600 people max. But I did work stage production for a number of years, and I did like Billy Joel and Aerosmith and like Rod Stewart and like these big, enormous, stadium shows.
Yeah.
And being able to be on stage, doing show call and all that, like it's not mine, it's not my music, but just being on that stage and seeing that sea of people from that perspective and the energy that's coming at you, it's something, it's like a drug, man. Like it's a crazy drug that you cannot replicate. There is no actual drug that can replicate that euphoria that you get from having a massive audience kind of just going crazy in your face.
That's true.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean it's a rush. It's a total rush, and it makes you like overcome things pretty easily too. Like sometimes if I do feel nervous or whatever like that, it's just like the excitement and the energy of the moment usually take over, and for some reason I play better than I even would at a normal club show. When it's that kind of setting and it's like it's working really well, and like the sound is usually really good at those things. There are some exceptions, but usually the kind of drum monitor that I have would be like a small club's PA.
Right.
You know what I mean?
One speaker on the left side or something, or the right side?
I'm surrounded by sometimes I have a wall of speakers like all behind me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes it can get too much because I do like to hear the natural drums. I like the acoustics of the actual instrument itself. So if you have hardly any of that and everything is just blasted at you from like 10 times louder than it should, it tends to sound artificial. But it's awesome to be able to have that kind of power at the same time. You're never struggling to hear anything. If anything, you're always telling your tech, turn the kick down further, the snare down further, guitar down further. I would much rather have that problem than not being able to have enough.
Right, for sure. So I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that you're writing some. You wrote some stuff that didn't sound like Sick of It All. Have you considered starting another project? I know that you today actually, or recently, you posted a picture of you singing with Rest in Pieces.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, have you thought about doing something else? Maybe going back to that, to being a front man, or I don't know.
Well, I mean, Rest in Pieces is like, we did a reunion show a few years ago. It was like 3 years ago now that we played the Black and Blue Bowl in New York, and the show went well, but it was, I really kind of wish we had a couple of warm-up shows before it, just for me to be able to like kind of shake off some of the rust. Cause like I was up there and I was like, I had fun. It was a really fun night, but at the same time, I know that I could have been way better as a front man if I had just kind of was a little bit looser and like more like in that role. I'm too used to being a drummer hidden behind a drum set, like where, like you don't have to like talk to the crowd or anything like that. It's just like, and even just the excitement factor. I looked at, videos of myself. I'm kind of like, well, I should have done more, I should have been more active. I could have been. I just wasn't. I don't know why, but I didn't even really think about it all that much. But it's who knows. I haven't had anybody like come up to me. I would always want to work with musicians that I totally respect. You know what I mean? Actually, it's funny because Dave Whitty is like one of the only guys who's been kind of pushing me to do stuff like with him. He would love to like work on some like random, and him. He's like involved in like 20 different bands at any given time. I'm
in a band with him, and we haven't even recorded or written anything.
But that's great. Yeah, that's great because like I really kind of envy that about him because for some reason it just like comes his way and he just rolls with it and he has a great time working with all these different people.
Yeah,
like I don't know. I just don't have that kind of maybe that kind of community around me. Like everything is pretty rigid,
right.
When it comes to Sick of It All being what it is. And when we're active, we're we can only do Sick of It All because there's so much touring that needs to be done. And we struggle to get 2 or 3 weeks off in between tours,
Okay.
So when we're touring on a new album and then, working on a new album, then recording a new album and all that kind of stuff, it all strings together. And before you know it, 10 years have passed and you haven't really been able to have more than like a month to yourself.
Yeah.
So
is the band at a point now where that's your living? You don't have to have a job or anything, right?
No, it's been our living since 1993.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Yeah, we're blessed people, because I know that there are a lot of people that had to give up music, even though they're like 1,000 times more musically skilled than I am, just because things didn't work out for them, but we're just blessed in that people gave a shit and wanted to hear us and wanted to see us live.
Yeah, especially during the pandemic. I know so many talented dudes that are working at Amazon warehouses and just giving up the dream because there's no touring, there's nothing, and shit.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And there were so many bands that were on the cusp of really making a name for themselves too, and then this shit happens. And then that's it. What are you going to do? Yeah,
it's nuts, man. Well, it seems like we're getting close to the end of it. I'm excited. I just got my appointment for a vaccine, so I could have that done and just be able to, go to shows, go out again. I still go out every once in a while if, something's happening, but I definitely have shut myself out from a lot of things during the pandemic. And, I appreciate the time because it's giving me more time to work on stuff at home and spend more time with the wife, spend more time, with myself, trying to, like I was saying earlier, trying to lose some of this weight that I put on during So it's been good to work on myself. But yeah, I want to be able to go out. I want to be able to go to shows, go to see some friends, go see my grandmother, for God's sakes. I haven't seen her in a year. So
wow.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. And that's one of the really messed up things about this pandemic is the fact that the elderly, we're supposedly doing all this stuff for the elderly, right? But at the same time, the elderly are dying of loneliness. They would feel so much happier to be able to see their family, to be able to hang out with their family. That would actually fill them with joy and give them, the will to live, as opposed to just wither away. So I think it's super important to get back with, your elderly family members and as soon as possible.
Hell yeah.
I mean, you don't have to go crazy like kissing and hugging and all that stuff, but I mean, just hang out. That's enough. And just hanging out in the same room is enough to make them so happy. The difference that I've seen on my wife's grandfather's face, when we visited him in January, it made such a big difference to his life when we all visited him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, and you can't really expect them to learn how to use Zoom or FaceTime. It's already hard enough to get them to even understand what a phone is. So to get them to use Zoom or something so we can see each other, it's even harder. So we got to get back to that for sure. And I'm stoked to be getting the vaccine so I can, not have to worry about that at all. And just, hey, I'm good to be here. So,
you, planning on heading back to Florida? Is that where your family is?
No. Oh. I have half of my family's here in California, and the other half is in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully, Florida, it was my life for 20 years, but I don't see myself ever going back. Maybe to visit, obviously, but just I don't see myself living in Florida. It's the Wild West out there, man. I'm not. There's no rules. I don't know if you've seen videos of just last week, spring break, there's Miami. Hundreds of people. I'm like, what are you? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was nuts.
They just don't care. And as much fun as I had in Florida with my band and doing it, doing the thing, it was also devastating to my well-being. I was just partying all the time,
Yeah.
And that's the lifestyle in Miami. If you're young, it's that party lifestyle, and it's just nonstop. There were times
too much.
Yeah, in my 20s, there would, it was like 4 days in a row, or haven't gone home or slept. Like it's just, it's just out. Like, go out, go to a show, go to somebody's house, and then from there, like, oh, there's this other thing happening. Let's go there, and then like, oh, let's go to the beach and let's go watch the sunrise. And it's like, oh my god, it's awesome when you're young. But now that I'm almost 40 and married and all, I'm good, man. I don't need that chaos in my life. So
you could head back to the Hunapoo Day and
that for sure.
Enjoy that.
Definitely visit for Hunapoo Day. That's something I want to do. You know what I've never done was Dark Lord Day, which I always heard was a riot.
Oh yeah,
I've always heard live metal bands and lots of fun.
I did it right. I guess that was 2019. I was there.
Nice, man. That to me was one that I never was able to go to, and I always wanted to. I was able to do. With Cigar City, I was able to do a lot of the big festivals like Boston Extreme Beer Fest, and we did a bunch of GABFs. And by the way, that beer that you drank that I'm responsible for, silver medal at GABF. Woo!
Oh, no way. Nice. Congrats.
Thank you. I hit up, it's funny, I don't have the medal. I hit up Joey Redner, the owner. I'm like, can you at least order a duplicate and just send it to me? Like, I'll pay you, whatever. Like, I want to be a nerd and put it on my wall. Is that cool?
Right. I mean, that's pretty cool. If you have a beer, then that's your baby.
That's my baby, man. That one, Guayabera. I did a beer for Killswitch Engage with Cigar City as well, called Alive or Just Brewing, which was nice. an IPA for them. And I want to do more of that, man. I love the beer industry. I don't want to be a sales guy anymore because it's
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if sick of it all doing a beer, right? Mm-hmm. What kind of style of beer would you think would be the most successful?
For sick of it all, I would do some kind of lager or like hoppy pilsner type of thing, something drinkable that you can chug and then go to the pit. You know what I mean? Because like, even though it would be awesome to have like a stout, chugging a stout and then going to like a sick of it all show is probably not a good idea. Like you get all sludgy,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think a band beer should ever be a stout, really.
No.
I mean, I guess it depends because like, there's a time and a place. But I think for us, like, doing our first beer, I'm thinking along the same line. So like what you said, a hoppy pilsner might be a good choice.
Even a pale ale, like a nice light pale ale would be cool. Mastodon, for example, has stouts, but like you could put on a Mastodon record and sip on a stout. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like for a hardcore punk, for sick of it all, I would like something chuggable that's tasty but chuggable, so I can go in and like rage.
Okay. All right. Noted. Because that was one of the things. Like when as I was in talks with like KCBC, for example, like we were talking about like what kind of style we were looking for, and they are experts at pilsner. Their lagers and pilsner game, like just ridiculous. Yeah. That Janiac the Maniac that they make is superb. Such a good beer. And it's so refined too. So I really like the idea of doing something along those lines. But I figured I'd pick your brain about that.
Yeah, I'd say pale ale.
It's got to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, and look, I wasn't kidding, man. I'm taking this. I'm running with this. So if you want help, we can make that happen. I definitely think for you guys, like a pale or a hoppy pils to start, and then you can go from there. Like once you establish the fact that Sick of It All has beer, then you can start branching out, maybe like a red ale or something like that, or a porter, like a light porter. I don't really see a Sick of It All barrel aged coconut vanilla imperial stout happening.
As much as I would love that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you could still do it, I guess, or it could just be like the Armand special,
Yeah, that's true.
But for like the general, for like the band as a whole, like something drinkable like that would be great.
Oh, what's funny too is, we were just talking about going to Dark Lord. Mm-hmm. Guess the reason why I was at Dark Lord?
Witty.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was his like completely useless drum tech because I mean that's the reason I got in. You know, he got me and my wife in, and I ended up like teching for him. But he's the kind of drummer that likes to set all his own shit up and move it all. You know, he doesn't want you touching his stuff while he's playing. So I would just like stand there and watch him play, and that was me teching for him. and so, you know, in between, you know, doing all of that kind of stuff, there was just a lot of beer being thrown back. And it was great. It was such a good time. I hung out with Danny Lilker from, you know, Brutal Truth and Anthrax. And it was, I hadn't seen him for so long at that point. And it turns out he's a craft beer guy too.
That's awesome.
It's awesome to be able to run into so many people and meet so many people there that I ended up being friends with.
Yeah, that's great, man. I mean, I hear about the witty and the drumming thing. Like at that Warped Tour where I saw you guys for the first time, I was like, "Oh, let me help you with the drums," and it was like, "Nah." The only help I got it. Like, the help was getting it off stage. Like afterwards, I'm like, "All right, give me that," and let's just move it out of the way. But he likes to, you know, and to give, you know, the world needs more Dave Whitties. The guy is one of the nicest. The day I met him. Was at a show. I brought a bunch of Cigar City beer for him, and I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to Virginia." He's like, "I live there. Hit me up, and you can stay at my house." I'm like, "You don't even know me. Like, how are you inviting me to your house? Like, what if I'm a killer or something? Like, how do you?"
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, like the world needs awesome. nice people like that, man. I think so.
Yeah, I call him Saint Witty.
The Saint Witty, yeah, that's good. Yeah. he needs to make a Belgian, some kind of Belgian beer and call it Saint Witty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, hey, dude, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
I know we've been trying to do this for a bit, and you know, I've been wanting to have you on for a couple of years now because I know that your love for craft beer, and that was like the root and foundation of the show, is to have people that love craft beer. So, thank you for finally doing this.
I'm still blown away. I'm like flabbergasted by the fact that that's your beer.
Look here,
that's the beer.
I'll prove it to you. Hold on a second. I got the original concept can. Hold on a second. So I have here the very first can of it, and
oh wow, there it is.
It had a different can label. That was supposed to be me, but it doesn't really look like me.
I can see it a little bit.
But yeah, that's the original Guayabera can, the first one ever.
I think I remember seeing that can design too.
Yeah, and then this is the Kill Switch beer I did with Cigar City as well. That I still have a can. I still have it sealed. I haven't drank it. This is probably terrible at this point.
It's an IPA?
Yeah, it's an IPA, regular IPA, I think it was. Yeah, regular IPA. But yeah, it's you know, it's been that was such a crazy moment for me when you're like, "Oh, I'm drinking this." I'm like, "No."
What are the odds? What are the odds? But okay, so it was meant to be. This interview was meant to be.
It was meant to be, brother. Well, thank you again, man. And you know, we'll be in touch for sure. And again, if you do want to do the beer and KCBC doesn't work out, hit me up. We'll make it happen.
Okay, sounds great, man. I appreciate it.
Take care, man. Have
a
good one.
You too.